It's there, but it's not here. Try it again on this way. No, I'm not going to do it. All right. So, yeah, this week's the big week, 57. I am distinguished in that I share my birthday first with Martin Luther. He was born on the 10th of November. And on November 10th, 1975, the Edmund Fitzgerald went to the bottom of Lake Superior. So I remember that in the evening of my, I guess I was 17 at the time. I didn't know that one. You better check that one on the internet. You just threw that one out. All right. Why don't you throw in Adolf Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin, too?
They don't even know who Jack the Ripper was.
Yeah, they don't really know, do they? They never did find out who that guy was. All right. You got me, Fred. You got me. All right, we are continuing on here with the Lord's Sermon on the Mount as He lays out the expectations and for those who are in His kingdom, part of the church. And we're going to focus for the next few weeks on the Beatitudes and kind of work our way through them. And if you go to Matthew chapter, Matthew 5:1. And seeing the multitudes, He went up into a mountain, and when He was set, His disciples came unto Him, and He opened His mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye, when men shall revile you and persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. So as the Lord starts laying out this great discourse, this great sermon, He starts out with these Beatitudes. He is just sort of, I guess he's elucidating characteristics of those who are His children. Now, as He begins to speak this sermon, He is primarily talking to His disciples. He's talking to His disciples and His followers, although there's probably a crowd around in the outer fringes that are also hearing what He's saying, but He's addressing His own as He relates to them this sermon. First one I want to look at here is Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. We want to look at this a little bit in depth. Now, this is one passage that I think has been misused and abused and utilized for the purposes of those who have nefarious political aims. They try to ennoble the poor. The poor are the special class, and all these political people do is they use the poor as a way of gaining their own political power. And their objective is not really to help the poor, but to keep the poor poor, so the poor will keep voting for them and keep them in power. So from that perspective, and I always, I laugh when politicians try to quote the Scripture. They're asked about things about the Bible, and they make real fools of themselves. I remember Nancy Pelosi was asked once, what is your favorite verse in the Bible? And she said, my favorite verse would have to be the Word. The Word. I'm thinking, that foolish woman probably has not opened her Bible in 20 years. She has doesn't even know what she's talking about. So, poverty. Let's talk about, since this is used, I want to talk a little bit about poverty, the worldly view of poverty, the biblical view of poverty first, since this verse is used so often to justify redistribution, wealth, and socialism. And did you see this week that in England they were rioting because they demand socialism, pure socialism? They actually were threatening Buckingham Palace, burning cars and stuff. Bernie Sanders, the big socialist running for president. I'm hearing more and more politicians basically openly, outwardly saying now we are socialists and this is what we want. Before they had to lie and sneak and cheat, but now they're emboldened. They think they're on the cusp of being able to bring this in. So poverty. Let's look at poverty from a world perspective first, and then we're going to contrast this against what the Lord actually is meaning when He says the poor in spirit. First, the worldview. We had in the 1960s the war on poverty. I don't remember that much about the specifics myself, but I remember my dad and my grandpa railing on Lyndon Johnson with his war on poverty and his attempt to bring in this great society, this utopia on earth. January 6, 1964, Johnson said, "Our aim is not only to relieve the symptom of poverty, but to cure it, and above all, to prevent it." So this has been 50 years. I think they just celebrated the 50th anniversary last year of this Great Society thing. So how does it work out, the Great Society? First of all, it's a failure. It's been a great failure. The statistics prove it. In the total cost in dollars for the last 50 years has been $22 trillion. So to put that in perspective, that is 3 times the cost of all wars fought since the American Revolution. Now you stop and think. Like the Civil War, for example. The Civil War was fought by Americans against other Americans on American soil, destroying each other's American property. I mean, that must have been an immensely costly war at the time. And then you fold into that World War I, World War II, all of that stuff. And our effort to wage this war against poverty has been 3 times that amount, 3 times that expenditure. In 1964, 15.5% of the Americans were in poverty. 2012, 15.5% are still in poverty. So, did we get our money's worth for all of that? No, we did not. It has been a colossal failure. Other realities about this so-called Great Society we've witnessed since the 1960s: soaring crime. I mean, Fred, when we were in school, we graduated at the same time. What was the big sin when you went to school? And you guys that are older, chewing gum in class, maybe running in the hallway, maybe raising your hand and talking out of turn. And now what are they dealing with in schools? You know, you got guys walking in there with their guns and their knives and all that kind of stuff. This Great Society has produced reduced productivity. Why work hard? You know the government's going to take care of you if you get fired for not doing your job. You don't have to work hard. 1965, 7% of all children were born out of wedlock. That rate now is 50%. Are born to unwed mothers under 30. Single-parent families have increased by a factor of 3. Why? Because the whole point of this is the father is no longer important in the family unit. The government's the great daddy, and we see the effects of this. The effects of illegitimacies. Yes, sir. Yeah.
And they make about $10,000, $12,000 income, getting $8,000 refund. All due to the early income tax credit.
Yeah.
We reward these young girls who have kids and not be
Yeah.
married.
And all of this, the common thread in all of this is the attempt by humanistic governments to create a utopian society that kicks God out of the equation. Biblical principle, biblical ideas, biblical foundations, God, the whole idea of God is just thrown under the bus. They want to try to create this utopian society that does not allow even for the admission that there is a divine presence. I think you probably saw it on the news this week. I saw it on TV and I saw it on online. They're extolling the idea that fewer and fewer Americans now actually believe in the existence of a God. Well, I'm not surprised, because that has been the objective. That is what they're trying to do. They're trying to push God out of society. The effects of illegitimacy. So it triples the level of behavioral and emotional problems among children. Now, there aren't too many of these at the school where our kids are going to school, but there are a couple, and you do see the behavioral issues when you go on field trips and stuff. You kind of see the effect of the family without dad in the family. Behavioral and emotional problems seem to run hand in hand with the fatherless family. Nearly triples the level of teen sexual activity, doubles the probability of a young woman will have children in a wedlock, doubles the probability that a boy will be a threat to a society, engage in criminal activity, and wind up in jail. These are all the fruits of the Great Society. The idea that the father is not important, the state is the father, will take care of everybody, your dad's just a schmuck, we'll take care of him for you. Now, who is really poor? This is interesting too. Current definitions of poverty are arbitrarily based on income and numbers in a family. I looked up the latest statistic. Fred, you probably have more relevant stats than I do. But the stat I saw was that in 2015, a family of 4 with an income of $24,250 is considered to be poor. In this country, that's what I'm saying, in this country.
Worldwide, I get which day.
I know. Well, I've been to Haiti. I only spent 4 days in Haiti. And when I was there, I realized that the poorest people I would see in the neighborhoods I did surveillance in Saginaw or Detroit, they live like kings compared to what I saw in Haiti. They live like kings. So, are American poor really poor? Here are some more statistics, interesting stuff. 80% of the supposedly poor in America have air conditioning. 75% have cable TV or satellite TV. 50% have personal computer. I doubt this number. I think it's probably much higher. I mean, if you factor in your iPhones and stuff, you're probably talking, extraordinarily high numbers have these things that are, When I was in Haiti, the thing that really struck me when I was there at Terry's place up there in the mountains, I saw a guy walk by, and all he was wearing was a T-shirt. It was threadbare. It was held together just literally by threads, and was all he had. I mean, just a few threads on that shirt were all that stood between him and being totally naked. I mean, I thought to myself when I saw that is what poverty is. That is complete destitution. That guy probably didn't have 2 pennies to rub together to buy another shirt. But these people claim to be poor, and they demand their rights from the government, but yet they're not really poor when you consider the things that they have in their lives. 40% have widescreen TVs. 75% own a car or truck. 33% own 2 or more vehicles. 82%. Now, I'm hearing these commercials all the time on the radio about, I'm a child, I'm a pretty good kid, but I'm hungry. I'm always hungry. I don't get enough to eat. I don't get enough to eat. Pushing the guilt card. But 82% of these people who claim to be poor never really report ever being hungry. Less than 4% report being temporarily homeless. 10% live in mobile homes. That's a pretty small number when you consider if they're supposed to be poor, there should be a lot of them living in these squalid mobile home parks. I've seen some of them in Flint, and they're pretty nasty. I wouldn't want to live there. I wouldn't want my dog living in some of those mobile home parks. They're pretty bad. 96% report that their children were never hungry. So they still get their food. They get to eat. 42% own their own homes with at least 3 bedrooms in the home. 77% under $30,000 have iPhones. So the effects of the welfare state. First of all, politicians like to vote to spend other people's money. My son, when Ben was about, 9 or I guess about 10, 11, somewhere in that era, he started to become politically aware. And so he asked me the question once. He said, well, Dad, what is the difference between a Republican and a Democrat? And I said, that's the wrong question to ask. The question needs to be between a conservative and a liberal. I said, because a Republican is not necessarily a conservative anymore. You can't trust the label. And I used Halloween. It was Halloween time, I think, when he asked me this, and I said, let's use Halloween as an example. Let's say you got one kid next, he just goes all out, and he makes himself a nice costume, and he's got the best on the block, and he's out there working hard, He comes home with 5 bags of candy. And this other kid over here, he sleeps all day long. He wants to enjoy Halloween too, but he's lazy. And all he does is he throws a bandana on his face, and he goes out, and he does trick-or-treating. He comes home with maybe a bag of rocks. And the liberal will look at that and see, that's not fair. You got all this candy, and this kid's got nothing. I demand that you give some of your candy to him. I mean, that's the liberal philosophy. The conservative would say to the guy that didn't do anything, would say, see how much he got by putting a little effort in and working hard? That's what you should ascribe to. But no, the politicians, they gain great political capital by pointing out all the inequities and then asking somebody else to take care of it for them. So they stick their hands in our wallet, take our money out, and use it to supposedly alleviate the poverty in our society. Welfare encourages taking, not giving. I had a fella, his name was Roger Brooks. He was retired from the Detroit Police Department. He was a homicide detective. And he was an interesting fellow. He told me that every Thanksgiving and Christmas, the police department would have a citywide distribution campaign where they would deliver turkeys and bags of groceries to people for the holidays. And he told me, he said there were so many times when we'd go up and knock on the door, with their food, and they would come out and say, "Where have you been? I've been waiting for this. It's about time you got here with this stuff." You know, and they just walk away thinking, shaking their head, you know, this is the kind of people we're dealing with. But, you know, the welfare mentality, you take, you don't give. It's always gimme, 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 gimme. And I find it fascinating when I go and serve subpoenas. I've got one client in Lansing. They represent the Flint Community Schools, and they represent them usually in 10-year arbitration cases. Some of these teachers have gotten fired from classes for some really reprehensible behavior in class. So they try to get their jobs back. Well, my job is to go out and serve the subpoenas on all the witnesses to whatever the thing was in class. I'm always amazed when I go to deliver subpoenas. I'll start my work around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. I knock on doors at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and people are getting out of bed in their pajamas and coming to get their subpoenas. I'm thinking to myself, you know, get a job. But welfare tends to corrupt. I mean, the government giving money, I mean, you hear all the time about the corruption at the top, and the fraud that goes on with people are always trying to defraud the government out of their benefits. It also discourages voluntary charity. The social network for people that are having hard times should be the individuals. We should be the ones who are out helping these who are disadvantaged. Yes, sir.
There's also talk in Congress about eliminating charitable donation deduction. The reason for that is the state gives the money, just because the state does.
Right. So what the state's...
They don't want us to do it.
Right. What the state wants to do, the state wants to put itself in the place of God. The state is God. The state is the one you go to with your petitions for relief. You don't go to God, you go to the state. I know. It's pretty. You probably see this stuff up close and personal more than we all do.
Yeah, 2015, 24,250 is probably available for a family of 4.
Right, that's what I just...
4 was it?
Yeah, family of 4. Yeah. And of course, welfare promotes dependency. And we're looking at this again, we're looking at poverty from the world's view. In order to make social welfare work, you have to use force to do it. The government has to use force to make socialism work, either at the point of a gun or by these oppressive laws and rules and regulations, which again, Fred, I'm sure you see them every day. What happens if you decide not to pay your taxes so that your welfare bum neighbor can get his food during the week? They're going to threaten to put you in jail for that sort of thing. So they have to use force and coercion to make this kind of thing work. And as I mentioned before, it eliminates the need for a father in the home, and that's all it perpetuates poverty. And then it promotes illegitimacy, again, perpetuating poverty. Causes of poverty. How does a person end up in poverty? We'll see some biblical references to this. One of them is oppression. People oppress others and keep them down. An example of that would be post-construction. During the post-Civil War era, you know, those who were previously slaves became sharecroppers. And there was a system deliberately set up to keep the sharecroppers poor, so they would not have any economic opportunity. So the government oppression of others is one reason for poverty. Laziness or moral foolishness. Drive down the Cass Corridor in Detroit, and you'll see people lying all over the street. They're not down there because, you know, somebody else put them there. They're down there because they made stupid decisions. They took that first hit of opium or whatever it is they're addicted to. They're down there because of the things they've done in their own life. Some poverty is caused by misfortune or sudden disaster. Things happen, and people fall upon hard times. Politics. I was online looking at this, and most of the major famines in the last 100 years have been man-made. They have not been the result of natural forces. For example, Somalia, Sudan, Bengal, the Ukraine, Cambodia, and the Ukraine. Stalin made Hitler look like a Sunday school teacher with the number of people he killed through that engineered famine. The numbers were around 30 million or so that he deliberately starved to death in order to keep them under control, because they were not believed to be supporters of his, and he had to manufacture this famine in order to deplete their numbers and control the country. Cambodia, that was within our lifetime. I don't know if you've ever read The Killing Fields. I've read it a couple of times, but it's pretty bleak what the communists did there when they took over the Khmer Rouge. And then also we'll see in the Scripture that some causes of poverty are the result of God's sovereignty. God uses poverty as a judgment. He threatens Israel with famine and poverty if they disobey his laws. So now let's look at poverty according to the Bible. I'd like to, we're going to read some scriptures here, so I'll be calling on people here as we go through this, but we want to see what the Bible has to say about poverty. First of all, I'll take Deuteronomy 28. And Pastor, would you want to do Amos 4:6? Yeah, my thing here is, I was going to if I can get it to come up. There we go. Where's it? Deuteronomy 28. All right, I'll start with Deuteronomy 28. And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and to do all his commandments which I command thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee on high above all the nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of God, the Lord thy God. Blessed shalt thou be in the city, and blessed shalt thou be in the field. Blessed shalt be the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy ground, and the fruit of thy cattle, the increase of thine kind, and the flocks of thy sheep. Blessed shall thy basket and thy store. Blessed shalt thou be when thou comest in and goest out, or comest in, and blessed shalt thou be when thou goest out. The Lord shall cause thine enemies to rise up against thee, to be smitten before thy face. They shall come out against thee one way, and flee before thee seven ways. The Lord shall command the blessing upon thee in thy storehouses, and all that thou settest thine hand unto, and he shall bless thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. The Lord shall establish thee an holy people unto himself, as he hath sworn unto thee. If thou shalt keep the commandments of the Lord thy God, and walk in his ways, all people of the earth shall see that thou art called by the name of the Lord, and they shall be afraid of thee. And the Lord shall make thee plenteous in goods, in the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy cattle, and the fruit of thy ground, in the land which the Lord sware unto thy fathers to give thee. The Lord shall open unto thee his good treasure, the heaven, to give the rain unto thy land in the season, and to bless all the work of thine hand. And thou shalt lend unto many nations, and thou shalt not borrow. And the Lord shall make thee the head, and not the tail, and thou shalt be above only, and thou shalt not be beneath, if that thou hearken unto the commandments of the Lord thy God, which I command thee this day, to observe to do them. Thou shalt not go aside from any of the words which I command thee this day, to the right hand or to the left, to go after other gods to serve them. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee, and overtake thee. Cursed shalt be thou in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field. Cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. Cursed shall be the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy land, the increase of thy kind, and the flocks of thy sheep. Cursed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shalt thou be when thou goest out. The Lord shall send upon thee vexing, of cursing, vexation, and rebuke, in all that thou settest thy hand to do in all that thou settest thine hand unto for to do, until thou be destroyed, and until thou utterly perish quickly, because of the wickedness of thy doings whereby thou hast forsaken me. The Lord shall make pestilence cleave unto thee, until he have consumed thee from off the land, whither thou goest to possess it. The Lord shall smite thee with a consumption, and with a fever, and with inflammation, and with an extreme burning, and with a sword, and with blasting, with mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thou perish. And thy heaven that is over thy head shall be brass, and the earth is under thee shall be iron. The Lord shall make the rain of thy land powder and dust. From heaven shall it come down upon thee until thou be destroyed. The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten. Before thine enemies thou shalt go out one way against them, and flee seven ways before them, and shalt be removed unto all the kingdoms of the earth. And thy carcass shall be meat unto the fowls of the air, and unto the beasts of the earth, and no man shall fray them away. The Lord will smite thee with the botch of Egypt, and with the emerods, and with the scab, and with the itch, whereof thou canst not be healed. The Lord shall smite thee with madness, and blindness, and astonishment of heart. Thou shalt grope at noonday as the blind gropeth in darkness, and thou shalt not prosper in thy ways, and thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build an house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof. Thine ox shall be slain before thine eyes, and thou shalt not eat thereof. Thine ass shall be violently taken away from before thy face, and shall not be restored unto thee. Thy sheep shall be given unto thine enemies, and thou shalt have none to rescue them. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. The fruit of thy land and all thy labor shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt only be oppressed and crushed always. So if thou shalt be mad for the sight of thine eyes which thou shalt see, the Lord shall smite thee in the knees and in the legs, and with a sore botch that cannot be healed from the sole of thy foot unto the top of thy head. The Lord shall bring thee and thy king which thou shalt set over thee unto a nation which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, and there shalt thou serve other gods, wood and stone. Thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither thou shalt lead. Thou shalt carry much seed into the field, and thou shalt gather but little in, for the locust shall consume it. Thou shalt plant vineyards and dress them, but shalt neither drink of the wine nor gather of the grapes, for the worm shall eat them. Thou shalt have olive trees throughout all thy coast, but thou shalt not anoint thyself with the oil. For thine olive shall cast his fruit. Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. All thy trees and fruit of thy land shall the locust consume. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee, and overtake thee, till thou be destroyed. Because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his, hold on here. My finger touched the wrong spot. To keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded, they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever, because thou servest not the Lord thy God with joyfulness and with gladness of heart, for the abundance of all things. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee in hunger and in thirst, and in nakedness and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck, until he have destroyed thee. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, or show favor to the young. He shall eat the fruit of thy cattle and the fruit of thy land, until thou be destroyed. Which also shall not leave thee either corn, wine, or oil, or the increase of thy kine, or the flocks of thy sheep, until he have destroyed thee. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates until the high walls and until thy high and fenced walls come down, wherein thou trustest throughout all thy land. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates throughout all thy land, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. And thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body, thy flesh, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters, which the Lord thy God hath given thee in the siege and in the straitness wherewith So that the man that is tender among you, very delicate, his eye shall be evil toward his brother, and toward the wife of his bosom, toward the remnant of his children, which he shall leave, so that he will not give to any of them of the flesh of his children whom he shall eat, because he hath nothing left him in the siege and in the straitness wherewith shall thine enemy shall distress thee in all thy gates. The tender and delicate woman among you, which would not adventure to set the full sole of her foot upon the ground for delicateness and tenderness, her eye shall be evil toward the husband of her bosom, and toward her son, and toward her daughter, and toward her young one that cometh out from between her feet, and toward her children which she bare, for she shall eat them for want of all things secretly, in the siege and straitness wherewith thine enemy shall distress thee in thy gates. If thou wilt not observe to do all the words of this law that are written in this book, that thou mayest fear this glorious and fearful name, the Lord thy God, then the Lord will make thy plagues wonderful, and the plagues of thy seed, even great plagues, and of long continuance, and sore sickness, and of long continuance. Moreover, he will bring upon thee all the diseases of Egypt, which thou wast afraid of, and they shall cleave unto thee. Also every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of this law, them will the Lord bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. And ye shall be left few in number, whereas ye were as the stars of heaven for multitude, because thou wouldst not obey the voice of the Lord thy God. And it shall come to pass, that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good, and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you, and to bring you to nothing. And ye shall be plucked off the land, whither thou goest to possess it, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all the people from one end of the earth even unto the other. And there shalt thou serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. And among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest, but the Lord shall give thee a trembling heart, and failing of eyes, and sorrow of mind. Thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear day and night, and shalt have none assurance of thy life. In the morning thou shalt say, Would God it were even, and at evening thou wouldst say, Would God it were morning, for the fear of thine heart. Wherewith thou shalt fear, and for the sight of thine eyes, which thou shalt see. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. So, we see poverty written throughout this passage. Poverty, absolute poverty, destruction brought upon a disobedient people as a result of their turning away from the Lord. So poverty, according to the Scripture, can be a judgment of God. Pastor, Amos 4:6.
And I also have given you cleanness of teeth in all your cities, and want of bread in all your places. Yet have ye not returned unto me, said the Lord.
Okay. Again, cleanness of teeth basically means they've got no food to eat. There's nothing in their teeth because they've had nothing to eat. Also, we see that poverty can be a result of laziness. We've got several passages here in Proverbs. Aaron, if you'd take Proverbs 6:10 to 11. And then Fred, Proverbs 20:13. Jim, would you be willing to read? Okay. Robin, how about Proverbs 24:33 to 34? And Lance, Proverbs 10:4. Whenever you're ready, Aaron. Proverbs 6:10 to 11.
Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that travaileth, and thy want as an armed man.
Fred?
13.
Yeah.
Love not sleep, lest thou come to poverty. Open thine eyes, and thou shalt be satisfied with bread.
Robin, 24:33 and 34. Okay. Proverbs 24:33 to 34. No, I've got something wrong here. What did you say, Proverbs 24? Oh, did I say 23? Let me try it here. Let's try 24. Hold on here.
24:33.
Right.
Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that travelleth, and they that want as an armed man.
Okay, and then did you have 10:4 as well, Lance?
I've got that if you want.
Sure. Well, whoever's got it.
He becometh poor that deal with the slack hand, but the hand of the diligent maketh rich.
All right, so we see, biblically speaking, that poverty is a result of laziness. You see this, I'm seeing this a lot where I work now at night. It's been an eye-opener. You got certain people that like to hide in places if they can get away with it and not do their work. So laziness, the result of laziness can also be poverty. Poverty can also come upon somebody as a result of their poor choices. Was that the second bell? It was. All right, well, we'll pick up here again next week then. Any comments or questions, what we've covered so far? Yes, Lance? 2 weeks from now, right. Very good. 2 weeks.